about J.K. Rowling, defending J.K. Rowling, which is not very surprising. Friend of the show, Noah Colwin. This is, by the way, an opinion piece by Pamela Paul, which was prominently featured on the New York Times, in defense of J.K. Rowling. Noah Colwin says, people are dying. Mass homelessness in modern America is a phenomenon that developed in Pamela Paul's lifetime. There are some people who her age live in countries where they've never known peace. I know too many people with 150K master's degrees in journalism who work at the Times and seem comfortable keeping quiet. I wish I knew fewer. Like, J.K. Rowling has a fucking moat in her castle that she lives in. You know what I mean? I'm sure you don't need to defend her. They also changed the title of a pro-trans op-ed from Jamel Bowie. Wait, did Parker deactivate her account? What the fuck? You know I can't click on this, right? It says that she deactivated her account. Parker literally recently DM'd me. Like, Parker DM'd me like 2 days ago saying thanks for, all of your endless support and your ongoing coverage on trans people. Literally like yesterday. I did not know that she's on Mastodon now. Okay. Parker Malloy is a trans journalist. Anyway. Late and easily confused. Have you talked about ContraPoi's tweet chain yet? No, I have not seen that. But hold on. Let's look at the New York Times demands from trans people real quick. Glad wrote this. It's Glad that did it, right? We've had enough. We've joined over 100 organizations and leaders to demand that New York Times stop printing inaccurate and harmful misinformation about transgender people and issues. Today, we're outside of the Times building to send a clear message. And the message was, Dear New York Times, stop questioning trans people's right to exist and access to medical care, especially at a time when, there's not even that much support for this concept of like blocking trans health care. And yet, for some reason, people are still advocating for it. I covered this we talked about this extensively on Transgender Marxist, aka Juniper's stream. We were raising money for trans charities. Yeah, it is on the front page. I know. We're gonna cover that in a second. On Wednesday, Catherine, friend of the show, Catherine Kruger, wrote an article. Shame on the New York Times. This basically summarizes everything that happened. On Wednesday, nearly 200 contributors to the New York Times made a simple argument to the paper's leadership that its breathless coverage of transgender children and trans healthcare is biased. What other conclusion can you draw, given the relentless string of Times stories raising supposedly troubling concerns about trans people, or the staggering statistic calculated by populist Tom Stalka that the paper has run some 15,000 words worth of front-page stories asking whether care and support for young trans people might be going too far or too fast? Rather than engage with the letter, though, the New York Times instead chose to patronize and dismiss his critics. To make matters worse, it then published an even more transphobic content just 24 hours after the letter dropped. It all adds to a disgraceful display of institutional arrogance. Oh, fuck. I can't read the rest of it because I'm not subscribed to Discourse Blog. Okay. New York Times doing exactly what, like, rich, out-of-touch, white liberal feminists love to do, which is find another fucking marginalized group of people to absolutely shit on for no reason whatsoever. Hold on. Let's see the letter. We have surpassed 1,000 New York Times contributor signatories. Yesterday, the Times responded to our letter by erroneously identifying us as advocates. We are not. We support GLAAD, but this is a tactic, one we are not falling for. We await a response. We are disappointed that the New York Times, this is an update. Fuck, why can't I find the like actual original letter, goddammit? I need to find the original. Why didn't you take a principled stand on Hogwarts Legacy? Your take was basically, what are you going to do? Because you are a fucking dumbass who doesn't actually care about trans people, or maybe you yourself are trans, and yet that still doesn't change the reality that you're a fucking dumbass in this circumstance. who thinks that, like, you know, yelling about Hogwarts Legacy even now when we have, like, moved beyond it and we're talking about other trans issues, you want to desperately cling back onto that fucking discourse because you're a dumbass, okay? Trans, cis, doesn't matter. You're a fucking dumbass. Shut the fuck up, okay? You are literally interrupting ongoing coverage over an issue where trans people and cis people have gotten together and have identified a problem and are correctly pointing it out and are expecting something from the gray lady, a legacy publisher that is profoundly important for dissemination of information, and you're still talking about a fucking baby game with wizards in it. Shut the fuck up! No one cares. No one cares about the fucking baby game. How is Hogs about the same thing? I will no longer be answering the idiotic screechings. The absolute idiotic screechings of morons that cannot comprehend that decentralized boycott movements that do not even pertain to, like, actually transphobic screeds within it, but instead to a disassociated IP holder that will be a billionaire whether or not you try to fucking boycott the game or not, okay? And will continue to be transphobic regardless. That was always destined to fucking fail. And, like, a genuine movement to stop one of the major publications on this planet from fucking basically reigniting transphobic bullshit that the media and the legislators point to. Every time the New York Times writes an article like this, the state legislators that pass legislation that no one is even asking for, by the way, to, like, make it so that it's illegal to give HRT to consenting adults, they use those articles as proof that there are demands. Do you understand? Nobody cares about the fucking baby game. People are going to play it. They're not going to play it. Who cares? You're a fucking permanently brain-broken, absolute diabolical dipshit. If you come in here and you try to bring the discourse back to the baby game, shut the fuck up! I despise you, you fucking freak! You're the problem for responding, bro. Can't you just ignore them, though? Yeah, here. Go ahead. I'll ignore you this way. Do you like that? Fucking dumbass. Enough. Man, you act like a man-child sometimes. Okay, dude. Son, you were covering the topic through the Times article. It's not like it was brought out of the blue. People who cannot comprehend that I am always and will continue to be a trans ally while I have a disagreement with the prior way of protesting, knowing full well that it was going to be a fucking objective failure versus this, okay, are not in it because they have skin in the game. Or worse, even if they do have skin in the game, they're in it for the drama because they have no other way to consume the news without turning it into, like, non-stop semantics debates. Okay? Shut the fuck up. stop trying to go back to old discourse that we have completely fucking moved beyond. Freaks, huh? Yeah, let's use the genocidal terminology. Nothing wrong here. Okay, we need a cleansing. It's happening now. All right. All right. Give it to me. I want to hear all of your rad lib, emotionally charged, narcissistic fucking sentiments in the chat. Get them out. Let's fucking nuke you, and then let's move on. Let's clean up this fucking community. You are disrupting coverage right now. You know you are disrupting coverage of literally what is ongoing within the trans community, specifically because you want your voice to be heard. You are not an ally. You are not a valuable person to the fucking movement. You are selfish, and you are adopting the aesthetics of leftism and utilizing the fact that this is a community based around being empathetic to garner support in the chat for a brief moment. It's not even clout that you get in this circumstance. It's a feeling. It's an adrenaline rush. Absolutely pathetic display once again. Anyway. You literally made a comment about dumb chatters abusing semantics over a sensitive topic, and someone actually thought, now is my chance to argue via semantics? Yes. If your goal is to make me mad and bait, then yes, we will ban you. Okay? The New York Times finally published a supportive opinion piece on trans people, and the headline was quietly changed to remove the reference about trans people. This is exactly why 100 of current and former writers signed a letter blasting his coverage of trans people. The relentless attack on trans people is an attack on all of us, is what Jamel Bowie wrote on the New York Times, friend of the show, Jamel Bowie. They quietly changed it to, there is no dignity in this kind of America. Because it was like a pro-trans op-ed. Okay. Just very openly doing shit like this. The New York Times has always had like weird right-wing, weird right-wing takes. Okay. They always have been a center-right staple with some leftist writing on it every now and then. Because the New York Times is a part of the mainstream media, okay? And the mainstream media has one goal and one goal only. It's not to like cover objective truth or anything like that. It is to defend capital interests. And obviously, as a part of that, divisive rhetoric that consistently continues to marginalize an otherwise hyper-marginalized group of individuals who have no way to protect themselves, especially with a sea of anti-trans legislation being cut at state legislatures in the least democratic way possible right now. There's a good opportunity to keep ramping up the culture war from the center, okay? By taking this like objective, neutral stance on whether or not this medical process should be given to trans people. Neutrality in the face of injustice is siding with the oppressor, okay? And they don't even take a neutral position. They take a fucking middle of the ground, like straight fucking in the middle, or sometimes objectively anti-trans take. It's insane. It's insane that we live in this world where the supposedly liberal mainstream media is just like making an argument about whether or not some populations in this country deserve to get health care or not. Like, that's wild. Anyway. But of course, the New York Times will turn around and say this is an attack on our coverage. This is an attack on like objectivity in news, in media, when like the piece itself, or at least the pieces I saw of it, correctly identified the issues. I'm still trying to find what Glad said, by the way, and the op-ed piece that was directed towards the New York Times. Okay. In the past year, page A1 of the New York Times has frequently featured stories with one similar theme, whether care and support for young trans people might be going too far or too fast. In the words of Tom Skoka, writing recently in Popula. By his estimate, the front page stories have totaled more than 15,000 words combined, not counting coverage of similar topics in the op-ed section in New York Times Magazine. He added, page A1 is where questions go. Is the number of young trans people suddenly unusually large? Is it good for young trans people to be getting medical treatment as drastic as breast removal surgery? If they're deferring more drastic medical treatment by taking puberty blockers, is it harmful for them to take those puberty blockers? If they're not getting medical treatment at all, are their schools letting them socially transition too easily? So I am going to instead defend this from, I'm not going to defend this from the perspective of trans people, because a lot of people are transphobic, including liberals. Okay? So instead, I'm going to show you how this level of objective coverage, supposedly objective coverage, can still be center-right by giving you a very similar argument that revolves around restricting a minor or an adult's access to a certain kind of medical care. Okay? They're doing the just asking questions, just curious attitude to basically hand wave away all the transphobic sentiment by hyping up what the right is also doing, but in way more aggressive and open terms. Okay? Imagine if the New York Times was cutting articles like, are the number of young women that are getting abortions suddenly unusually large? Is it good for young women to be getting medical treatment as drastic as late-term abortions? Okay? If they're deferring more drastic medical treatment like late-term abortions by taking birth control, is it harmful for them to take birth control? If they're not getting medical treatment at all, are their schools letting them think it's okay to get some level of protection that thinks taking birth control is correct? Because birth control, contraceptives, and also abortions are medical procedures that the right identifies as a threat. Okay? They identify that exactly as a threat, and they openly state, when you go to a right-wing outlet, you make no mistake, they say abortion is murder. Even some of them say contraceptives are also unimaginable and shouldn't be taken. You know, they try to stop you. The New York Times, on the other hand, has a liberal attitude towards this, where you will not see them write articles this much because a lot of white women, one, get abortions, and two, are pro-abortion, okay, even if they're fucking conservative. So the New York Times knows its base of support, so they would never fucking concern troll around abortion in this exact same way. But transphobia is easy to concern troll around. It's easy because a lot of people's starting position is transphobic. You have an older, wealthier, out-of-touch base of support in the New York Times. They also don't fucking fully get it. So they're also easy to dupe into being more aggressive, taking a more combative and aggressive stance. The reason why I made this argument and changed it to abortion is because most people hear this and go, wait, these are valuable questions to ask. Yeah, you can make that exact same argument about how valuable those questions are to ask about abortion too. Ultimately, both are medical procedures that the New York Times is advocating to stop at a time when legislation is being written to stop it. On Wednesday, in two separate open letters to the Times leadership, two different groups argued that the Times coverage of transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people is biased. The timing was coordinated, the organization said. The Times has in recent years treated gender diversity with an eerily familiar mix of pseudoscience and euphemistic charged language, while publishing reporting on trans children that omits relevant information about its sources, reads the open letter, organized by the Freelance Solidarity Project, digital media division of the National Writers Union. The letter is addressed to Philip B. Corbett, the Times associate managing editor for Standards, initially signed by more than 200 Times contributors, including Alison Roman, John Herman, Gia Tolanito, the Virginia Soul Smith. And the letter has gained thousands more signatures since Wednesday morning. The letter notes that the Times coverage has been used to support anti-trans bills across the country. Okay, this is something that S-Queer talks about all the fucking time. A thing that I saw her... so this is Alejandra Caraballo. She mentions this regularly. She mentions this regularly, where she talks about how, people use this kind of these kinds of screeds that the New York Times publishes when they're making an argument. It's state legislatures. Would they still do it without the New York Times' support? Certainly. Okay, I'm sure they would, because they're fucking demons. But why is it that the New York Times, which is supposedly this like liberal institution that cares about truth, justice, and objective news coverage, covering this from an angle that is otherwise lending credence and legitimacy to unfair, anti-scientific, right-wing, anti-trans arguments? Think about that. Last year, Arkansas Attorney General filed an amicus brief in defense of Alabama's Vulnerable Child Compassion and Protection Act, which would make it a felony punishable by up to 10 years imprisonment for any medical provider to administer certain gender-affirming medical care to a minor. Doctors are not allowed to give minors puberty blockers that diverges from their sex assigned at birth. Of course, you can't make an all-encompassing bill, because then doctors would not be allowed to prescribe birth control medication. So they had to say that diverges from their sex assigned at birth. So that's the other part of this process, is that, of course, children get fucking medical procedure. And it would be unimaginable if the government sort of decided all of a sudden that children can't get medical procedures. But of course it's okay when it's trans people that we're talking about, because no one wants to defend trans people. The brief cited three different New York Times articles to justify support of the law. Emily Bazelon's The Battle Over Gender Therapy, Azine Goraishi's Doctors Debate Whether Trans Teens Need Therapy Before Hormones, and Ross Douthat's How to Make Sense of the New LGBTQ Culture War. As recently as February 8th, 2023, attorney David Begley's invited testimony to the Nebraska State Legislature in support of a similar bill, approvingly cited the Times reporting and relied on its reputation as the paper of record to justify criminalizing gender-affirming care. You are playing a role, whether you recognize it or not, in justifying the state interrupting a medical process that the healthcare professional and the patient have decided to go down, to take. That is unimaginable. You will never in a million years consider that to be valid in any capacity if it was for any other ailment, any other treatment. That is bananas. Part of it is also this like belittling of trans existence and making it seem like it's a purely cosmetic thing. It's the same as like allowing someone to get breast implants, like allowing a 16-year-old girl, a cisgender, girl to get breast implants when it's not. It's no different than birth control. It's no different than minors getting birth control. It's no different than minors getting any other kind of hormones for whatever kind of hormone imbalance that they have going on. But under no circumstance would that be appropriate. Trans healthcare saves lives. Trans acceptance saves lives. And the worst part about it is that these people know. A lot of the people in the New York Times know that that's the case. And yet they still do it. They do not care if trans people kill themselves. They don't care. That's the sad state of affairs. I'm not going to run a top of the hour. I'm going to run the top of the hour ad break here. I'm not doing a fucking debate because it's a serious story that we're covering. Okay? I'm just going to tell you, I'm running it now. If you no longer want to see it, you can subscribe for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. You can get gifted a sub. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. Okay? The letter draws parallels between the Times coverage of trans people and earlier decades its coverage of gay people and the HIV/AIDS and its treatment of gay employees. The New York Times managing director, executive editor A.M. Rosenthal neglected to put AIDS on the front page until 1983, by which time the virus had already killed 500 New Yorkers, they write. He withheld planned promotions from colleagues he learned on the grapevine were gay. Many of his employees feared being outed. That last link is to a 2018 piece in the Times T magazine, 6 Times journalists on paper's history covering AIDS and gay issues. Reading the Times' early HIV/AIDS coverage, T magazine editor-at-large Kurt Soller wrote then, is to be reminded how news coverage shapes perceptions and policies, particularly when it comes to oppressed communities. Eat, sleep, go fishing, thank you for the 5 gifted. Spy Monkey, thank you for the 5 gifted. Pug Daddy, thank you for the 5 gifted. In an interview with Hellgate, New York, Joe Livingstone, a critic and writer who helped organize the Freelance Solidarities Project's letter, argued that the Times reporting on trans people is intended in part to drive views and outrage. There are really not many trans people in America. That's the part that is like deeply frustrating to me. Trans people are such a tiny, tiny fraction of society. And yet they make up so much of the culture war coverage. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. It's just, it makes no sense. Half the time when people were writing legislation about like not allowing trans girls to participate in, high school sports or whatever, they were writing that to like bully or stop like a random trans girl that's like 12 or 14 years old from participating at the fucking swim meets. And that's it. Like one person. You're writing a whole ass legislation to like bully one person who isn't even that good at swimming. Like there's nothing. Like you've just never met a trans person if you think that like all trans people are like fucking demon athletes, It's so insane. In no other circumstance would you ever look at this and go, wow, this is so valid. It's so, like, you in no other circumstance would you look at this and go, yeah, I believe that this is the right thing to do. You would be like, no, what the fuck are you doing? Shut the fuck up. But because it's a question that seems to relate to institutions that people feel ownership over, for example, schools, especially primary schools, what are people doing with my child when I'm not around? I think there's that paranoia at the heart of what makes people want to read about this stuff, which is only getting more and more intense the more the coverage. Newspapers have a passive explanation. what people want to read is the news that we report. And just to go back to what I was saying before, that is a willful misreading of what journalism does in society. I think they're doing it because, yes, there is this like weird, creepy fascination because these are, albeit a small group of people, but a group of people that completely shake the foundation of gender, which is so important to everyone's identity as a consequence of the social conditioning revolving around the rigid binary. So you see someone who is trans and you go, what the fuck? I don't understand this at all. Please tell me this is wrong. Please tell me this is morally abhorrent. And that's it. These people are hurting no one. They just want to exist. The fact that people care so much is weird. Fucking trans people don't care as much about trans issues as transphobes do. Okay? It's crazy. Yes, I covered Brianna Gay. I did. Yes. Which is also important for this story because, like, the UK and UK media across the board has been obviously incredibly uncharitable to trans people, but also on top of that has been, like, violent towards trans existence in general. The UK is Turf Island for a reason. And in the heels of of yet another, trans murder that took place, they refused to say that the victim was trans. Adding on to, and hiding that it was most likely a hate crime. GLAAD also published an open letter on Wednesday in protests outside Times headquarters calling out the Times' irresponsible, biased coverage of transgender people. That letter was signed by more than 100 equality and media organizations, individuals including celebrities like Judd Apatow and Margaret Cho. GLAAD's letter includes specific demands for the Times, including a meeting with trans community members and more hiring of trans employees. The Freelance Solidarity Project's letter simply asks for a response. And a response they got. Charlie Statlander of the New York Times, their director of external communications, provided a statement on Wednesday afternoon saying, "We received the open letter delivered by GLAAD and welcome their feedback. We understand how GLAAD and the co-signers of the letter see our coverage, but at the same time, we recognize that GLAAD's advocacy mission and the Times' journalistic mission are different." Yeah, we know. GLAAD is like trying to prevent trans people from being fucking murdered, trans people from being legislated away out of existence. And the New York Times is like, no, actually, it's good that we're doing that and we should do more of it. So yeah, that's the difference. I love that this, by the way, is exactly what right-wing news outlets would say. Sorry, free speech. We are going to care about freedom of speech. You're taking down our free speech, which they're not. No one is, okay? We're going to keep writing about how trans people shouldn't get fucking medical coverage. Sorry. That's our journalistic mission. Nice, man. Thank you. As a news organization, we pursue independent reporting on transgender issues that include profiling groundbreakers in the movement, challenges and prejudices faced by the community, and how society is grappling with debates about care. By the way, this attitude is precisely the reason why the New York Times has always been on the wrong side of history. This is why you can go back to the Bracero program with the New York Times defending the program, literally with the words wetback on their fucking headline. This is precisely why you can go back far enough and find op-eds defending Adolf Hitler. That's why they're always on the wrong side of history. Because they're not there to write objectively. This is why you don't even have to go back that far to see what their opinion is on the Iraq War. You just said a slur, dog. Oh my God. Just fucking literally laser me in the brain, okay? Shut the fuck up. I know I just said a slur. Shut your stupid fucking mouth up, okay? I hate the left so fucking much. Unbearable. You are unbearable. Shut the fuck up. Nobody takes you seriously. This is why everyone laughs at you. Okay? Is that the main point of contention here? Do you want to make this the main point of contention here? No. You are a narcissistic baby who wanted to selfishly center themselves in their own pet project when we're talking about something entirely different. The anger today is really humiliating. Yeah, you should feel humiliated if your goal is to literally sidestep the conversation away from something entirely different, specifically because you care about the optics. Shut up. This is why I always say I fucking despise the left so much. That's right, King. You say slurs. The left is stupid for pointing it out. No, you are stupid because the fucking conversation revolves around it, okay? The conversation demands it in this circumstance. You are a fucking asshole. You are the reason why so many other fucking assholes love pointing shit like this out. It's like the dead naming conversation all over again. There's a difference between calling a Mexican person that word versus explaining the historical context of how right-wing the New York Times is when they're defending the Bracero program and use the word wetback in their fucking headline. If you can't discern the difference between the two, you're a fucking idiot. You're brain dead. But just like how right-wingers love fucking posturing as though they have something important to say, you yourself want to posture in here. You're derailing the conversation. You're selfish. This is important for me to address because most people do not understand that they are being selfish when they do this. Anyway. Big realization when you figure out leftists are just as fucking dumb as fascists. They're just not evil. Yeah, I know. I tried to fucking make sure that that is understood all the fucking time. Anyway, let's continue. I mean, here. New homosexual disorder worries health officials. That was the first. That was when they mentioned AIDS. By the way, that's before that they just refused to cover it. From 1917, extremists rise to power in Russia. From outset of revolution, they have thwarted efforts of moderate governments, sapped Kerensky's rule, supported Premier only when the Kornilov movement filled them with apprehension. Creed of the extremists, Kerensky's efforts all vain. The Council of Five. Moderate New York Times, ladies and gentlemen. In 1986, the New York Times ran a William F. Buckley op-ed in which argued that the government should force people with AIDS to get 2 tattoos advertising their status, one on their forearm and another on the ass. William F. Buckley is a fascist right-wing psychopath. So we hate leftist, liberals, conservative, fascists, so what's left? I disagree with leftists. I hate fascists. But I disagree with leftists who want to fucking chirp and basically engage in the conversation as lifestylists. That is entirely different. Here's the New York Times writing a puff piece on Hitler. Her Hitler at home in the clouds, high up on his favorite mountain. He finds time for politics, solitude, and frequent official parties. Her Hitler in the clouds. Mussolini, hope of youth, Italy's man of tomorrow. Hitler, driving force in Germany's fascism. His fiery orator has won men of all classes to support the doctrine of National Bolshevism. Spectacular rise to power. He has energy and reserve. Germany's Duce. I mean, he was. Now, of course, if you ask me, as the New York Times, I'm not like fucking delusional, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you, is the New York Times still like an advocate for Nazis? Not at the time, not anymore, because it's not fashionable to do so, because we are in the post-World War II existence. Okay? But I promise you, if you think that they would cover Nazis with the same level of like scathing criticism, I don't know, let's say 10 years down the line, let's say something crazy happens and like Nazis have risen to power, fascism is taking over everywhere around the world. If you think that they would be critical of that sort of thing, you are delusional. Their job is never to criticize power structures. Their job is, thank you to Macy's for the playlist, their job is to defend pre-existing power structures. Days after hundreds of current and former New York Times writers pleaded with the New York Times to stop their transphobic coverage, and days after a 16-year-old trans girl in the UK was murdered in a hate crime, they published this bullshit. They don't care. The cruelty is the point, says Alejandra. And she's right. This is the same writer who's a damn straight white woman trying to police a black queer woman on what words to use to describe their identity, the goddamn caucasity. She says, let's say gay. She apparently gets a lot of questions. Maybe ask her why she wrote this. Let's finish this. The very news stories criticized in their letter reported deeply and empathetically on issues of care and well-being for trans teens and adults, is what the New York Times said. Our journalism strives to explore, interrogate, and reflect the experiences, ideas, and debates in society to help readers understand them. Our reporting did exactly that, and we're proud of it. Here's why that's a lie. You can cover both sides of an argument, as the New York Times often does, sometimes to a degree that really frustrates me. Like when they heavily feature actual fucking lobbyists that get paid to promote, anti-abortion screeds, okay? They do this all the time. They do this with that too. However, when they do that, at least they know to massage the narrative in a way that favors abortion, in a way that recognizes that abortion is a medical procedure that needs to be kept between a woman and her medical professional. They don't do the fucking both sides hand-washing, hand-wavy bullshit because rich white liberals care about abortion. They get abortions. But they might be, as a consequence of how little the trans community is, how small it is, They might not have anyone in proximity. They might not have a trans person that they care about. And they can't see anything but in front of their fucking noses. That's it. I asked Statlander to clarify which letters this statement is referring to, just the GLAAD one or the other one from the Times contributors. He responded, the letter you linked to with the numerous signatories was delivered in person by GLAAD reps to the New York Times this morning. GLAAD